Lieutenant 233. The main job will be done today by Wind and Barham. Your task is prior to Margarita blending, approach the zone and occupy the position at Control 12. Conceal utilizing the relief. Primary targets, manpads and anti-aircraft guns. Let them make no-shots. Wind stays in the sector and will cover your and Barhan operation. Then pairs finish it walking, clean up the area. You're gonna be walking at minimum altitude. Don't allow any combat or a transport unit leave the zone. Don't touch foot troops unless they bother you. There is not much time left. Wind takes off in 10 minutes. Keep strictly to flight plan on approach and you will enter the zone unnoticed. The route is open. Take off permission granted. Return at your discretion. And welcome home if you run out of ammo. How do you read, 233?
233 reading well. Keep sharp to flight plan. Enter the area silently and take up the position at control points 12. Primary targets, manpads and flak. Attack transport and combat enemy units after strike. Work at minimal altitude. Look around for air threats. Startup checklist completed. Taking off.
Now, confirm it 233. Got it right. Good hunt to you. Report on objectives upon return. Over.
Welcome to the Vergeev Group campaign. This is mission number 16, and this is barbecue. And I thought it just occurred to me on the 16th mission that it might be helpful to go through the startup procedure and narrate that. So now that we've heard the briefing, let's go ahead and do that. So I shut the cockpit door, and the first thing I'm going to do is turn on the batteries. So lifting the covers, switching batteries on, and then my flow, the way I like to do it is I go across this panel here. You'll see how it flows, but I'm going to turn on the generators, which won't actually kick on until the engines start, but that's just to get them ready for that. And then you've got to turn on the fuel pumps for the forward and aft tanks, and then your fuel quantity gauge, which then you can check by hitting this button here. So that's good. Then I turn on the APU fuel shutoff valve, and I turn on all my radios. So this is the intercom, VHF1, VHF2. This is for downloading data from wingmen. This is VHF talk. Then I turn on the anti-collision beacon. You want to do that before you start up the engines. And then I move back to the rear panel where I turn on the Ekran system and close that, cap that off. And you really want to get this going as soon as possible, this INU, to get it spooled going so it can start to hone in on our position for the navigation systems. And once you've turned on the Ekran system, you can then test nagging Nadia. Then you want to hit the master caution warning light twice, and now we can start up our APU. So I usually like to just start that, and then also at the same time release the rotor brake. When you turn on the APU, you've got these indication lights. The valves open, which we already did, or that wouldn't light up and this wouldn't happen. APU oil pressure, and then it'll settle around 700, and you'll have an indication that the APU is on. At this point, I turn on the governors for the left and right engine, the fuel shutoff valves for the left and right engine. I usually turn on the ABRIS at this point, and then we'll select the left engine first, hit start. Then I turn on the avionics here, and I usually do it probably a little bit too early. You're supposed to wait until you get around 2,000 RPMs and then go ahead and let the fuel go through. And at that point I come back to the right panel, enable my ejection seat, which really you're supposed to do at the very last moment. Targeting system, navigation. Then I go back here and enable my UV26 countermeasures, the warning receiver. So it sounds like we've got one up Should settle around 7,000 RPMs. And then switch over to the right engine and start it. Go ahead and let the fuel go through. Make sure it lights off. It started, but hasn't lit off yet. And right around there it goes. When that starts spinning, that's called light off. And let's see, where are we? We've got that started. We were back on the back panel. We had just enabled the warning receiver. Then I go through straight to the autopilot channels and engage all of them except the altitude hold. I set my initial state for the altitude hold to radar, even though it's not on yet. I turn on wingman commands so we can do the data link thing. Go ahead and enable both the PVI 800, and I like to have it set in case I want to add a waypoint for an INU so that I can use my schwal to designate a point that I want to turn into a waypoint. Then I right click on the PVI 800 main switch to operate, select the first waypoint, and I like to hit this one down here to give me a range. I then go to navigation mode on my Abris, select map, zoom in all the way, since we have to hit those waypoints really tight. Maybe turn down brightness a little bit. Finally up here I turn on the pitot heaters so they don't get cold and start giving me bad data on my flight parameters. And finally we've got both engines going, settled. I'm going to stop the APU, shut the APU shutoff valve, and then I'm going to bump my throttles up to auto position.
Смотри экран.
And finally, I will set up my countermeasures. I should have checked this right off the bat. My parking brake, which it's off. I should have had that on the whole time. That's on. That's off. And we've gotten clearance to go ahead and take off. So here we go. Clean up the gear and the anti-collision beacon. So we need to sort of, we're going back to that same area, but we're going to kind of go in through the back door and sneak around so they don't see us coming. I've always liked this mission. It's one of my favorites. So we're going to be going back to the same area, but we're going to be on the other side of, usually we're right there close to the border along that river, but we're going to be behind the mountains, back off to the, what would that be, to the east. And then we kind of go over the top of the mountains and kind of sneak in. And we need to take care of another stronghold. I guess the armistice is, we're going to break it with a surprise attack, which is kind of rude and unethical, but hey, I'm not making the decisions, I'm just following orders. So again, we don't have to go all the way over to the border there. We'll just hit this one, our steer point, and then head back east. In this mission, the sun can really get in your face, and
233 on control points 2.
there's a few things that you can do to get it out of your face, and we'll do those things when it starts to get annoying. So let's see if we can max out the speed here. And I'll just turn on route mode just for kicks, except it's still set to waypoint 1, so we better hit 2. And then it turns back around towards 2. I still don't have altitude mode set. because I want to be able to stay as low as possible, but also be able to bump up over these power lines. And go ahead and set the master arm switch to on. Now as we gain altitude, I'm going to have to increase the collective to be able to maintain this speed, and we'll get to a point where the engines are pretty much maxed out, and we'll get those 2 warning indicators for the engines up here in yellow. And you can go a bit while those are yellow, but you really want to come off of it as soon as you can. So there they are, power limit. So at that point I just pulled back on the collective until the lights go out, and then you have to use your stick to pull back a little bit to get over, you know, this hill or any other obstacle that's in your way. And then when you get over the top, you can just let the stick go again, and it'll try to seek that speed that we had set. So usually we're headed off in the over there between those 2 hills, but this time we're going to be sneaky about it. Also, that buzzing was our radar altimeter warning, and I'm going to go ahead and set that very low because we're going to be very low most of this mission. And we're coming up on this mountain. I'm probably about to smash into it. So obviously here we're not going to be able to maintain this speed once we start climbing over this hill. There's been a few times where I've been able to maintain 200 knots over the entire hill, but it's kind of tough to do. No chance of it this time. Our next waypoint indicator, since we're in route mode. If you're not in route mode, it's not gonna show those indications.
233 passing control points 3.
223 Naval, don't forget to give a glance at 1065.9 altitude. Don't engage if targets identified. Be careful, so that you're not down at the very start. Roger?
233, roger that. Looking around. It's clear.
223 Naval, follow the stream after control tree. Keep low profile.
Naval, 223 copies that, along the stream.
So it's difficult to maintain a low profile when you're going down a hill. And if you noticed, I had retrimmed. I had pulled the nose up basically to above 10 degrees and then let it settle back down. But if we were pointed like this, you know, we're going to end up doing 300 knots really quickly. And especially if you're trying to keep a low profile or you're following someone trying to stay in formation, there's no way you're going to be able to do it. You're going to have your stick pulled all the way back, and the trick is to just set it almost as if you were going to come into a hover, and then let the collective out, and you should get a nice 100, 150 knot speed with total control as to your altitude along this slope. So when I cross that little ridge, I usually like to speed it up. Again, we're trying to be sneaky, so I'm gonna haul ass through here and try to get in between these 2 hills up here as soon as possible. Make sure my barometric altitude hold is not engaged but set, because it was on radar. Now I put it to barometric. And we're still in route mode.
233, control point 4.
Now up to the top of this stream, is where the sun is really going to become an issue. You know, and I'm not sure what the view is like if you're wearing a helmet, you know, with the visor and everything, like the real pilots. I'm sure it's some sort of UV protection, but there's an additional thing or two you can do. One of which is to turn down the brightness on the Abris. So one of the problems is not just the glare that gets annoying and you can't see outside the cockpit. It's more like, okay, so that was our 6th waypoint, so en route mode is no longer going to work. I'm going to turn that off, because it's limited to 6 waypoints. And as we get into the sun here, got to hit these steer points. Our Abris, not only are we going to be like in a bunch of glare looking out the cockpit, but our Abris is going to be all washed out.
223, reporting control point 9, proceeding to the plan.
So one thing you can do is turn the Abris brightness down, which will help. And the other thing that you can do is this little dude here, which helps a little bit. I think the manual referred to it as some sort of color filter, but I'm not exactly sure what color has to do with it, unless it's just saying it's filtering out certain wavelengths of light. But if anyone knows, feel free to post a comment. It does help with the sun though, because it's going to be right in our face during our attack, of course. So we're just on the other side of the mountains that we're usually on over to the right, over there. We're just on the back side now, so they can't see us coming. Gets a bit windy back here on this mission as well. And your ability to smoothly control your altitude and speed while descending along the slope, like we talked about before, is really put to the test here, because we're popping out over on the other side, and you're really going to want to stay low, but overspeed there. You're going to be going a lot faster than you think you're going, and all of a sudden, you know, you're either going to expose yourself or you're going to fly right across the border. It's just one of those illusion type things. It's you can't feel the speed for some reason. So keep an eye on your speed as you get close to this area, because we're going to be turning right here in a second for a kilometer or two, where we'll set up our attack. Just retrim when you need to.
Just past control points 10, 233.
Okay. Really want to try to stay close to the flight plan. You know, you can see we're off to the left of it. And I'm going to come all the way up to like 10 degrees nose high and trim it out there so we don't start slamming the speed. This is where it happens. You think you're not, you'll blow right over that steer point. You really need to be careful or you'll get lit up with a stinger.
223 at 11s. Exit here. Descending to 12s.
Okay, hit that one. Our next, this is going to be our attack setup. The next waypoint. And right over there to the left is where we're going to be attacking, so you want to stay low. And I'll trim it out about where we're going to be when we hover, and then I'll just push forward on the stick if I need to speed up to get there. But you don't want to blow past this one either. I'm going to turn on my, put the laser on standby. Don't want to gain too much altitude. So we want to get those stingers first. And obviously I know where they are because I've flown this, you know, a million times, but you also need to hit this steer point before you attack because it's a trigger to make some things happen in the mission. Alright, so now we want to hover.
Focus all attention at target zone. Man pads and AA guns are priorities. Engage the cannon. Rockets after the strike. No report required. Repeating, additional permit not required to engage the targets.
233, roger that. Looking after the area. Searching for targets. Cannon engaged. Targets without reporting.
233, now, correct. Await the strike. You act after the strike. Over.
Okay, we'll set up right there. Make sure we're in a good stable hover. Automatic turn to target. Actually, we can get a little bit more altitude here.
Выпусти шасси. Выпусти шасси.
Okay. So let's zoom out of our Abras to see where we're pointing here. It can get pretty confusing and when you're down this low. Okay, so we want to hit right here, but there's a couple stingers right here. So I'm going to come over.
Выпусти шасси. Выпусти шасси.
Let's get some more altitude. Okay, now we're in business, but let's get those two guys that are flaky. There they are. They can be kind of hard to find sometimes, but they will smoke you really quickly. All right, they're toast, or better be. Yep. So we want to take out the AAA after we take out the stingers. So there's a number of AAA installations. I'm going to turn up the brightness a little bit here. And the contrast. Did we get that one? Yep. There's another one. If you don't set up a stable fighting platform, you know, you're going to be drifting. You're going to be maybe drifting into the mountain because you're so low. You really have to keep an eye, stabilize that hover, or you're going to be trying to do way too many things at the same time, and it's not going to work out. There's another installation. So I guess, you know, I want to, aside from stressing the hover stability that you need to make sure you've got, you're going to have to wipe out everything basically in this town. And there's a few little surprises, not really surprises, but you may be tasked with taking out a particular, you know, helping out with a particular unit, taking out this unit or that unit, but I'm going to go ahead and bag this one and call it done, and we'll see you guys in mission number 17.